Welcome to Real Life Beyond Faith, where a formerly Christian, currently atheist couple takes a deep dive into the experience of life after deconversion. This is episode 23. I'm your host, Jenica Crail.
And I'm your host, Patrick Crail.
Patrick's back.
I'm back.
Yay. I missed you last week.
Yeah.
I think I did okay on my own, though.
Yeah.
Did pretty decent. I did the recording by myself. I did the cleaning of the audio and the editing and the publishing and all the things.
Yep.
Like a champ.
Like a champ. Bam.
Yeah. So, but I am really glad that you're back because I like our chemistry and our dynamic when we record together.
Yeah.
Forever. But yeah, so this week we interviewed Melanie Rice. I think she goes by Mel, but I think it's interchangeable. I don't know. Anyway, it was a really good conversation we had with her, and she talked about her journey out of religion, her religious background, and also her experience with domestic violence and abuse within her marriage while she was religious. So, trigger warning there.
Yeah.
So before,
if you're uncomfortable with hearing stories about domestic abuse.
Yeah, just be prepared if you're going into this, that there is talk about that, a little bit of talk of violence. So
it's not really graphic, though.
No. But do want to give you a heads up about that because I know it can be difficult to hear some of that stuff.
Yeah. We want to be sensitive to our listeners.
Right. But it was a very, very good conversation and definitely worth taking a listen to if you so choose. And we hope you enjoy the interview.
Hi, this is Trav Mamone, host of the By Any Means podcast. Join me every week as I interview bloggers, podcasters, writers, and activists about the intersections of atheism, humanism, racial justice, feminism, LGBTQ rights, and other social issues. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes, Spreaker, and Stitcher, and you can read my blog at freethoughtblogs.com/byanymeans. And remember, that's by spelled B-I. Come take a listen to the musings of a queer humanist because, hey, aren't we all a little bi-curious?
Have y'all ever wondered what it's like to be a redneck with empathy? Have you never heard of a Southerner who isn't a blathering bigot? Well, have I got the show for you. It's the Podunk Polymath podcast, hosted by myself, Chris, and it's the sentiments of a secular, sarcastic, screwed-up Southern SJW and skeptic. You can find me and the show on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, or your favorite podcatcher. Y'all stop on by and take it easy now, okay?
Hey there. If you like what we're doing and want to support us, you can head over to patreon.com/reallifebeyondfaith and become a patron for as little as $1 per episode. Your support is greatly appreciated and goes toward a podcast hosting site, equipment, time spent recording and editing, and our activism in our community and beyond. You'll also gain access to behind-the-scenes video content from our recording shenanigans. Another great way to support us is to give us a 5-star review on iTunes or Stitcher or share our show on social media. You can find us at facebook.com/reallifebeyondfaith and Twitter at RLBFpod. And you can email us at reallifebeyondfaith@gmail.com. Today we have the honor of having Melanie Rice on the episode, where we have become pretty good friends with Melanie over the past, I don't know, what's it been, like 2 years or something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, so we're excited to have her on to hear her story, a little bit more about her background. And so let's just dive right in. Melanie, thanks for being with us.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. So we want to hear a little bit about your background, about your story, kind of your journey out of religion, and kind of just hear a little bit about you. That's kind of what we do on this show, is just kind of dig into what it's like to leave religion and the impact it has on our lives. So if you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe start with like what you do now, and then we can like back it up and talk about where you've come from.
Okay, sounds good. I am going to be 40 next month. Yay. I am a married mama of 6 awesome kids, 3 of which belong to me from my belly and 3 of which came from another mama, but they are all mine. I'm married to a really awesome guy. You guys know him, so of course, I don't have to say anything about that. But he actually is one of the reasons why I am where I am right now, non-religiously and mentally and physically. He's an awesome guy. I just resigned about last month. I was the managing partner of the Normalize Atheism campaign, which is a really awesome thing. I just had a lot of stuff going on that, I couldn't give all of the time that I wanted to it. But of course, I encourage everybody to go take a peek at it because it is an awesome thing. And I am also the founder of the Secular Domestic Violence Survivor Support Network, which helps survivors of domestic violence with either links or resources and places that they can go to of a secular nature. Because a lot of times when you go anywhere for help, be it any kind of mental help, physical help, it's a lot of times religious. And there's nowhere out there for someone to go and get resources for someone that isn't spiritual based. So I wanted to start that because that's a lot of what I went through. And it was very difficult to find support for that without someone saying, I'll pray for you, or, you have the 12 steps or whatever it is.
Yeah, so, actually putting your work to use.
Right.
Yeah. So that's me.
That's awesome.
Cool.
So you grew up religious?
Yes.
Okay, tell us a little about
very much
that.
I was born and raised in the church. I actually was Brethren, which is a form of Mennonite, Quaker, form of Amish. Very quiet. When you raise your hand, meant you had a question. It was very, very serious church, boring, very boring. I grew up in, I went to church camp every year. My parents were counselors at church camp. My parents were deacons in the church, board members. My mom and dad, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my great-great-grandmother, and my great-grandfather, they were all deacons of the church, very, very deep into the church. And when I grew up, I myself was very, very involved in the church. Leader, I was Sunday school teacher, I was board director, children's church teacher, I was Bible school coordinator, teacher, leader, you name it. If it had to do with kids in the church, that was me, because I wanted to help kids, raise them right,
Yeah.
so to speak. Thought I was doing a good thing, helping kids, but it was very, very much. It formed who I was from the time that I was little. I remember as a kid coming home on the bus from school, pretending like Jesus was coming home with me and we were having a sleepover, hanging out. And if you're not religious, that sounds weird, but if you were ever religious, you understand. Jesus is your best friend.
Right.
Yeah.
I went to youth retreats. I was involved in, you name it. I was the quote unquote goody. I babysat on the weekends and went to church on Sunday and youth group on Sunday night. And, that was my world. That was, everything, even up through the point of my marriage. I was married for almost 20 years. And, that shaped a lot of my marriage.
Yeah, it all sounds very familiar.
Right. So it sounds like you not only were heavily involved in church, but also took it very much to heart. Like you actually took your faith seriously. Am I reading that right?
Yes, absolutely. Very seriously.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's exactly how I was. Like, because I see a lot of people who are involved, but
It's more of like a social thing.
Yeah, it's like social, it's community and everything.
Yeah.
But the faith itself is not super important to them.
Kinda
And whether it's
secondary.
true or not is kind of like on the back burner. But for me, and it sounds like for you, it was like our whole world. Like it impacted every aspect of our lives.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was the kid that had their Bible in their backpack.
Right. Yes.
Yeah,
me too. So, did you find, well, I guess I'll let you continue with your journey, but I'm interested in how you taking it so seriously impacted you coming out of it. But I'll let you get there in your own timing if you want to continue.
Well, I got married at the age of 19 when my parents got a pretty nasty divorce when I was 17. And the day after I turned 18, I moved in with my now ex-husband. We were engaged at the time. And my mom got remarried, so I moved in with my ex-husband and his parents to finish out high school because my mom was moving to another town. And, they were very religious too. They were Pentecostal. My ex-father-in-law was a Pentecostal preacher. So, it wasn't anything that, I wasn't surprised with other than, the type of worship that they had. And so, I got married. We moved a state away and had my first child when I was 19. And of course, I wasn't married when we had her, but, the right thing to do afterwards was, make sure you go get married. So we went to the courthouse and got married.
Right, of course.
Yeah. So we lived away from our parents for, say, about 4 or 5 years. And, when we'd come home on the weekends, I'd go to church. And, that was very important to me. I still did, read the Bible, worshiped it, whatever. My sister-in-law, my ex-sister-in-law, who I'm very close to still to this day, her and her husband were youth leaders in the church nearby. They actually lived near us. So, I would go to church with them and whatnot. But I was in a domestic violence marriage. I was in an abusive marriage, and religion played a huge part of that for me. Of course, the Bible says that, wives are supposed to be submissive to their husbands. You're supposed to do everything they say. You're supposed to obey them, love them as Christ loved the church. There was no question in that. The Bible said, the only way that you can go to heaven if you were to get a divorce was if your husband allowed it, or if they cheated on you,
right,
or death. Jeez. And then once you were divorced, you were never allowed to get married again. That's what I was brought up to believe,
Yeah.
And, divorce was wrong. It's not, not as wrong as other denominations, but, it was the wrong thing to do, to the point where, I was reading books upon books. I remember a book I even remember the author, Stormy O. Martin, The Power of a Praying Wife. And I read that front to back, took notes. The binding was coming off of that thing because, I was trying to figure out a way to fix him so that, I wouldn't get beat up all the time. But, at the same time, I'm supposed to be a woman of God. I'm supposed to take it. I have no way out. That was my trap. That, and of course, in any domestic violence situation, you're going to have mental and physical limitations as to, you can't go. But that to me was my big one, was that, if I leave this marriage, I will go to hell.
Yeah.
I mean, the horrible things that would happen, after huge fights, I would pray and literally take myself to my bathroom and sit in the bathtub and scream, why? Please help me. Somebody just help me. Because I would wonder with me being the godly woman that I was, and I never did wrong. Of course, I was a smoker. That was the worst of it. And I thought that was horrible.
Oh, jeez.
But yeah, exactly. And, I obeyed my husband. I did not cheat on my husband. I did everything he asked me. I obeyed. I was, a good child to my parents my entire life. I never gave them issues. I did everything. I was a Sunday school teacher. I taught children. I was leading children to the Lord, and I was still in this place where I could not understand why God would not help me, why he was seeming to get away with just these horrible things that he would do to me. And I was the one suffering, but I was the one doing the good. I didn't understand that. For years, I just couldn't understand. I would scream and pray, why? And I remember praying, please take me now. I would rather be in heaven with Jesus than have to deal with what I have to deal with on a daily basis. And I look back at it now, I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? Because when you really step back and you think about it, pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah. So would you consider him pretty religious at that time? Like, was he outwardly practicing, or was he just kind of like going along to church with you, like when you would visit family?
Oh, no, he wouldn't go to church. I would beg him to go. His mom and dad, of course, still were in the church. His dad was retired, but they still, went to church, very involved in the church. And I would go with them every Sunday, take the kids, we'd go. And he wouldn't go, but he was a narcissist. So of course, everything was about him. Yeah. He would do, nothing he had done was wrong. And, everything was my fault. It was a punishment. He was religious and when he needed to be.
Yeah. He just
one of those
used
types.
It for his narcissism.
Right, when it would benefit him.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
God, I just can't even imagine what that must have felt like for you. And I'm so sorry that you went through that. It's making me tear up to hear it because I care so deeply about you and it hurts to hear that.
Yeah. It's hard to understand how people can treat other human beings like that. And especially supposed loved ones, people who you're close to.
Right. And I also can understand how trapped you must have felt because I had those same beliefs about marriage and divorce, and it would be absolutely terrifying to be in that situation and to know that it is sinful, possibly damning to leave the situation based on your beliefs. And I just can't. Oh, man, that must have been so difficult. So how did you finally escape that situation?
Well, I slowly, I was a very inward person. I very rarely even was with family. I wasn't really, I wouldn't say wasn't allowed. I perceived it as to me not being allowed to do things, such as if I would go visit my dad by myself, take the kids, because he never went anywhere. He was an alcoholic, still is an alcoholic actually, and a drug addict. So he wouldn't leave the house. And if I would go visit anybody in the family, take the kids and we'd go, the minute I walked out the door, I was getting a phone call, when are you going to be back? How long are you going to be? Why are you taking so long? Just this bombardment of, just why are you gone so long? Why are you gone so long? So I just, after a while, I just didn't go anywhere. I mean, it was just a lot easier just to stay home and not deal with it than to go somewhere and have to explain to your family why he was acting that way or, why you couldn't stay very long and what I had to deal with when I got home, the third degree and the questions and the where were you and why did you take so long? And I tried, he would lie and say, I tried to call your dads and you weren't there to see, if I was really lying. I mean, that was just a thing that happened all the time. And I started getting closer to people that I worked with. And one of them became one of my best friends. And I jokingly made a joke about, well, if I ever did that, my ex would kill me. And he caught on. And he had said something to me about it. And for a minute, I was like, you know what? That felt really good to just say that to somebody. And then once he caught on, he started noticing things, how I would act when the phone would ring, or like if I had to work late because I was in management and I worked at Walmart. So, I mean, you know, there was times when I had to be there for hours after I was supposed to be. And that was never good.
So he would start getting suspicious?
Yeah. And of course, I was the only one working. He didn't work. So, you know, I had to. I had no choice.
Yeah.
And, you know, he ended up, this guy being my best friend, and he started noticing things, and he started encouraging me and, you know, would say, you know, you really don't have to deal with this. You know, if there's anything that I can do, you know, there's places you can go, you know, you can talk to your parents, you know, but I was always told throughout the entire time I was married that my parents didn't care about me anymore. When my parents divorced, they broke off and started their own new lives. They were done with me. My dad got remarried and had another kid. He didn't want to have anything to do with me. My mom got remarried and she didn't have anything to do with me. So, you know, you're told that so much, you automatically believe it. And so I thought, you know, I can't just barge in on my dad with 3 kids. There's nowhere for me to go. That, you know, that was one of the reasons why I would go. And I would say to him, you know, I just can't get up and go.
Yeah.
So, you know, after a while I was like, you know what? I really can start making plans and maybe I can do this. So,
do you have kids at this point? How many?
Yeah, I had 3 kids.
Okay.
I had all 3 of my kids. After a pretty big fight that we'd had here, I say here because I'm actually in the home where it happened. I got the home.
Oh.
Yeah. We are actually moving into this house, and we had just the bare stuff, like, you know, beds and TV. And I got home from work that night. It's probably 8, 9 o'clock. And I had carried, now by myself, mind you, everybody's mattresses, beds, you know, everything upstairs, put everything away, made everybody's beds, and came back downstairs, and he's sitting in front of the TV on the video game, and he asked me, did you call Comcast to have the internet switched over?
First words? After all that work?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. So I said, no, I didn't. I said, I don't have the stuff to set it up. The box and, you know, all the Comcast box and everything is at the other house, which was about 5 or 6 miles away. And he started flipping out. He needed the internet, because how could he play his video games with his friends and talk to friends online if he didn't have the internet? So I said, fine, I'll go out to the other house. I will get the box. I'll do whatever. So on the way out the door, I'm calling the cable company to have everything switched over. And I drive to get the Comcast box. And on my way back, he calls me and he says, now, mind you, we are literally a block from a convenience store, literally. And he calls me and says, can you pick me up a pack of cigarettes on your way in? And I said, seriously, you can't get up and walk down and get yourself a pack of cigarettes?
Jeez.
That was the worst thing I could have done.
I don't know.
He just started flipping out. Fine, you know I can't go anywhere because I've been drinking. I mean, just completely. So I was like, fine, I'll get him. So I stopped and got him, and I come back, and what I normally did was, to diffuse the situation, I would take a bath. And I know that sounds strange, but I would go into the bathroom, lock the door, and just sit in the bathtub for however long until, you know, I thought, well, he's calmed down. I can get out and get back down. It didn't work this time.
How do you, real quick before you continue, I'm just curious from a psychological perspective, how do you feel about taking baths now? Is it still comforting to you, or does it remind you of that?
It's comforting.
Okay, good.
Is that kind of like your safe space?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you ask Adam, he laughs about it, but I will literally say, I need to go, and I call them tubbies because that's what we called them, you know, when my kids were little. It's time for tubby. So I mean, it's just stuck. And I would say, well, I think I'm going to go up and get in the tubby. And he, okay. So, I mean, I can sit in the bathtub and just read, or, you know, play games on my phone, or just, you know, look at videos or whatever. I could be in there for an hour, 2 hours. And nobody ever bothers me because they know. My daughter and I even have made up our own little thing. It's called a shaft, where, when you take a bath, you really can't get clean enough. So you take a bath for as long as you feel like you're comfortable, and then you get up and you take a shower so you can clean yourself. So it's called a shaft. But yeah, you could honestly say that is my safe space. Yeah, it makes me,
Cool.
It's my comfort zone.
I'm glad that wasn't taken away from you because of, memories that could be brought up by it or something,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So continuing on with your story.
Oh, okay. Well, so I get back to the house and he, of course, is in a mood. And I get my bath and I get out and I come downstairs and he just would go on and on and on about things. And a lot of times it wouldn't even have anything to do with anything. So the kids were in bed by this time. So I went up to get in bed. And normally, what he would do, and I knew he would, he follows me. He would follow me up to the bedroom, sit on the edge of the bed, and just keep going, just badgering, just belittling, just anything he could think of. A lot of times it was accusations of things. He would think that, I remember one time he wanted to know why the hamper was up in the bathroom, or why there was a hair in the bathtub. He thought somebody had been there. I mean, just little things just to keep the fight going. So I got up and I kept saying, please just leave me alone. I just want to go to bed. Please just leave me alone. And he would follow me everywhere. And finally, I remember standing in the doorway of the bedroom, and he was in the bedroom and I was in the hallway on the outside. And he just kept going. I turned around and looked at him and said, please just leave me alone. And he said, no. And he had taken his fist and come up onto the right side of my head. So the first thing that happened was, of course, I went deaf completely.
Oh, my God.
I just started hearing ringing. And then the next thing I remember was, now. Now is your chance. And I didn't know at the time, but my kids were up and heard everything. And I said, come on, guys, let's go. And they knew, and they got up and they put their shoes on, and he followed us the entire way out. But we got out to the car and he stood in the door of the car blocking me. The kids were in the car and they were screaming, just let us go. Just let us go. And he's screaming at them, oh, I guess I'm a bad dad now. I guess I'm a horrible father now.
Yeah, now.
Yeah. So finally, my oldest daughter, she's 20 now, she looked over at him and she said, Dad, please just let us go. So he let go of the door and he walked back in the house. And I got in and I drove away. And I almost came back because I thought, oh, my God, I don't have anywhere to go. Where am I going to go?
Right.
I thought, so I pulled into a parking lot of a hotel and I thought, I can spend $60 and be here at this hotel tonight, but that's $60 I might need later. What do I do? So I called my mom, and she worked nights. She works with handicapped people, helping them live in their own homes, but she's a care worker. And she was at work that night, and I called her and I told her what happened. And she said, you come here right now, get my key, and you take those kids to my house and you stay there. I'm calling the police, and then I'm calling your cousin, who at the time she was like my sister. I'm going to call her and she will meet you there. And I went there and I stayed there for about a week, even though the next day I got an emergency DVP, which is a domestic violence petition, a restraining order, basically.
Right.
And he was removed from the house and was not allowed within, I think it's like 500 or 700 feet of me, and was removed from the house by the state police. And we stayed with my mom in her 1-bedroom apartment, all 5 of us, for about a week until I come back. And of course, the rest is history.
Yeah.
Wow.
Were you afraid that he would break the restraining order and?
Oh, terrified. Terrified, because he always would say, you're not taking those kids away from me.
Right.
You're not leaving. You're not going to do this. You're not going to do this. And the night that I left, I didn't sleep because he was looking for me.
Yeah.
My dad didn't know where I was. I didn't tell anybody where I was because I didn't want them to have to be in the middle. I didn't want them to be involved. I didn't want them to have to know and then have to lie to him or have to tell him. So I just didn't tell anybody except for my mom and my sister that was with me. And it was all night calls, text messages. It would be, 1 minute I'd get a voicemail with him bawling and sobbing that he missed me and he was so sorry. And the next minute he's screaming and yelling and cursing at me. Jeez. Just one extreme to the other.
Yeah, makes you want to go back to him, huh?
Right.
Yeah. I was terrified that he would. That's why I stayed with my mom for the week because I didn't know what he would do.
So how did your kids handle this whole thing? Like, did they see what was going on, like, while it was happening? And what about afterwards?
Yeah, it sounded like they were ready to head out the door, so
yeah,
they must have been seeing it.
I think my youngest, he's 14 now. And we left in 2013. So he was pretty young. He did see a lot of things. He heard a lot of things. And the kids were never physically harmed. My son was, of course they were spanked, which I disagree with because, they have enough, my kids at least have enough, violence in their lives. They didn't need any more. They had a lot of mental abuse. They were yelled at a lot. He was always angry. He was always screaming at them. Always calling them names. Like I said, my youngest, he's 14 now. The week that we left, he was allowed to speak with them on the phone 15 minutes a day. That was it. And the first day, my son hid in the closet at my mom's house.
Oh,
wow. He was too scared. I said, well, bud, why don't you want to talk to Dad? He said, because we have the PlayStation. He might get mad.
Wow.
Yeah. He, because when I went to court, the judge, of course, wanted to know the situation as to why I was getting the restraining order. And he said, anything else that makes you feel fearful for your safety. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, everything that I could think of just came out, every instance that I could think of. And of course, my kids, they saw what happened to me. So, of course, they were afraid that it might happen to them.
Yeah.
I would protect them with everything, though. I mean, I would take it before them. My daughter's boyfriend had a baseball game, and I had taken her to a baseball game. And when I got back, and he said, Mom, I fell and hit my head. And I said, well, how did you do that? I mean, he had a goose. I mean, like, it was the size of a golf ball, maybe larger on his head. He had fallen off the couch onto our tile floor, playing with the dog out in the sunroom. And I said, buddy, why didn't you tell Dad? And he said, because I was afraid he'd yell at me. Oh. So it was very difficult for them. They were torn because, that's your dad.
Yeah.
You love your dad, but at the same time you hate him.
Right.
My oldest, she only went to visitation for the first, I think, maybe month or so because the court told her that she had to or I would go to jail. And then after a while, she just quit going. And she only speaks to him if she has to. She just left for college last week. And she hadn't talked to her dad. He didn't text her on Christmas. He didn't call her on Christmas. Nothing. And I said to her, and of course my son, we still have split custody with him, and he's slowly staying more time at my house instead of his house. But he was at his house the day she left. So I said, well, do you want me to text your dad and have him bring your brother over here so he can see you off? Or, what do you want? She said, I don't want to see my dad. I said, well, you know that he's going to want to come over and see you if he knows that today you're leaving. So she sucked it up and she was like, okay, I want to see my brother before I leave. She's in the same state, but she's 2 hours away. She's like,
right.
She hadn't seen him in a couple weeks. And, so he had come over and gave her $160. Her dad gave her $160, which is probably more money than she's gotten in 10 years. Mm-hmm. And, she's like, well, at least I don't have to pay for my books now.
Got something.
Yeah. But the younger two, they were in therapy. So my middle, she she's 16 now. She was in pretty intensive therapy for a while. She was the one that was receiving the tears. She's one of those types of kids that she feels sorry for everybody, and she'll tell you what you want to hear just to make you feel better. And she was unwilling, and she had to listen to the pity stories and the sob stories, and it really got to her. She was really, and of course now she doesn't see him now either. The only one that does is, like I said, my son. He only goes maybe 2 or 3 days a week, and I think it's out of guilt now because he doesn't remember a lot of stuff. But he had made the decision a couple weeks ago to stay here during school because it helps him better with school. He has some developmental issues. He has ADHD and he has severe social anxiety disorder. So when he's with us, he has structure. He has times that he has to do things. We actually have a schedule set for him. And he doesn't at his dad's. And he understands that it's good to have that. So on his own, he's decided to stay with us during the week for school and then go to his dad's on the weekends.
Right.
And his dad called him one day last week and gave him a guilt trip. Well, I bet your mom is the one making you stay there. And, just making him feel bad. So he decided to go back over to his dad's for a couple days. So we're still working on it, but they're a lot better than they were when we first left.
Yeah.
So
And they're safe now.
Yes,
Yeah.
very safe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. So I'm assuming that during the early years with your kids, you were raising them religious, I'm assuming. So with you coming out of your faith, did they just kind of follow along, or was it a little bit of a struggle?
Well, my oldest is 20, and she, I believe, was a non-believer before me. She just didn't tell me.
Gotcha.
When I wasn't all the way there yet when we discussed it, but during my divorce and separation, when things were really, really bad, that's where I started questioning, because, I started asking myself, what kind of God would allow someone like me to go through what I went through after everything that I had laid down for him. How I had just, and I was having conversations with my mom, is there really a God, or is, he just making me suffer? I don't understand why a loving God would do that. And she said, I don't know either. I just don't know. Now she's religious and she still is, but, she still loves me. She knows, she supports me. But
that's good.
I had been divorced probably a good year or so when I started dating Adam. And of course, we've known each other our entire lives. We joke that I'm 2 years older than he is. So I always joke with him, I've known his mom longer than he has, because, our families are so close.
Yeah.
And our first date, the next morning we went to breakfast, and he asked me, he said, he's atheist, was an atheist before, years ago, years before I even was thinking about the A word. And he asked me, he said, so where's your position at? What do you think? And I said, you know what? I honestly have no idea, because I'm at a place now where I don't believe that there's a God, because why would he or she or it put someone like me, what I went through for 20 years, my kids? Why would a loving God do that? I don't understand.
Yeah.
So it kind of just snowballed from there, and I just felt more comfortable opening up and talking about it. So when I started talking about it with my oldest, she was like, oh yeah, me too. I'm like, oh, well, okay, then good.
Yeah. Makes it easy.
And, yeah, that was pretty easy. So now my middle one, she was still going to church, and she was involved in missionettes and, Wednesday night church and all this stuff. She wasn't having anything of it. And then Reason Rally came.
Mm-hmm.
And we asked her if she wanted to go with us. And she, a couple weeks before, was kind of like, she would borrow one of Adam's shirts, that says, I'm an atheist. I don't bite, those, cute little shirts that says imagine no religion, those type of things. She'd sneak them off and she'd wear them.
And that's a hard.
And we'd kind of be like, what's going on here?
Right.
So we went to Reason Rally, and she was still kind of, on the fence, and by the time we came back, she had made the realization that, yeah, this is bull. This is not something that I think really is going on. So now
that's where we met you guys.
Yeah. So now she is, full-fledged. She's a non-believer. She does I will have to say, she goes to church on Wednesday nights.
Just for friends.
Not because she's religious, because her boyfriend plays church league basketball.
Oh, okay.
And you have to go to church so many times in order to be eligible to play church league basketball.
Of course.
So she goes,
something.
Yeah. So she goes to church with her headphones in. She sits with her headphones in while they have their prayer. And then my son, he for a long time he was just, you can't say that, Mama. You can't say that. You don't say things like that. And, we'd listen to podcasts and he would get embarrassed, and we'd talk about things, or, I'd talk about evolution to him. He'd talk about it. And he was like, no, that's not, he just, no, that's not what it is. So, last year after, ReasonCon, I told him that, cause we have a cat named Krause that we named after Lawrence Krause. And I told him, we saw him speak, and he was like, oh, that's so cool. And he quoted something from Lawrence Krause. Wow. And I was like, what? Yeah, he said, forget Jesus because the stars died so you can be here today. Yeah.
Oh, wow. He said
that? What? Yeah. I was like, what'd you say? So, of course, I don't push. I've never, ever done that. I've never pushed any of my kids. I've never, I don't want to be that parent. Right. You make the decision for yourself.
You don't want to indoctrinate in the opposite direction.
Exactly. So I would say about 2 weeks ago, I don't even know what brought it up, but he was sitting next to me on the couch, and we were talking about a movie or something. And I said, oh, it was Christmas time, and we were talking about, we didn't put up a tree, or we didn't do any of that stuff because, we all work different crazy times. So it was just, we did our Christmas whenever we could do it. And I asked the kids if they minded that we didn't put up a Christmas tree, and Zoe and Tabitha, my oldest, they didn't care. So I asked my son, and I said, well, except for you, bud. I said, if you want us to put up a Christmas tree, if it means that much to you, we can do that. He was like, why? I said, because you believe in Jesus and stuff. And he was like, no, I don't.
Huh.
I was like, oh, what? Really? He was like, yeah. Like, well, that's interesting. So, of course, I dropped it. I didn't want to get into it anymore because, that's something that we'll, just come to and talk as we go. But yeah, I let them decide for themselves because, like you said, you don't want to indoctrinate them in the opposite direction because that's just
exactly.
It doesn't grow their critical thinking skills if you're just telling them what to think.
Right.
Either way. And that's what I think is so beautiful about being a secular parent is you get to actually teach your children how to think, not what to think. And I think that's so powerful because then whatever decisions they make are completely theirs and they can own it and they feel more strongly about it that way.
Exactly.
So how long did your deconversion process take, and how quickly were you able to or willing to drop your religion?
Well, I think in my case, it was just a very slow conversion. It was like, it wasn't, when I hear other people's stories, it's like sometimes people sound like they just, overnight they decided, I don't believe in a God, or they realized that there wasn't a God. Right. For me, it was like, I knew in the back of my head for a long time. I felt that for a long time, but I still played the part and I still acted that way because my family is so religious. I didn't, I never posted anything on Facebook. Oh my goodness, no. It was, and I didn't, and of course, the first thing I thought was my parents are going to think that Adam talked me into this because, of course, they all knew he was an atheist before I was.
Yeah.
And, and that's the last thing I want is for my parents to think that, another man is controlling me, which, of course, now they know him. They never would have thought that to begin with because they know him and they see us now. So, it was a very, very long time before it was just a slow, gradual thing, I think, because it was like I was still holding on to that because it was something that I'd known for so long. Because it was like, well, if there's no God, what what is this that I've wasted my entire life on?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really hard part of it.
Yeah.
Like,
and then I thought, if there is a God, why the hell would he do this to people? Why would he make people suffer like this? And not just me, but I mean, there's people out there that have it 100,000 times worse than I ever did. And he allows that. If he's real, I don't want to have anything to do with him anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If there is a God, it's clearly an indifferent, what's the word I'm looking for? Uninvolved God. Yep. And it's like, well, if it's just a God like that, like some deistic God, then what's the point in believing in it? Because it doesn't impact our lives anyway.
Yeah, not some omnipotent or omnipresent kind of being.
Or definitely not benevolent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can break down your faith right there, just that question alone. And then you get into all of the other stuff, like the fact that the Bible is just like a load of bullshit stories and forgeries and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It all just starts to crumble apart. So then, I know for you, like that was the first thing that got you questioning. I imagine at this point, there's so much more solidifying that for you because you've learned stuff. I know you listen to podcasts and go to conferences and such.
Absolutely.
It's like, I know for me at this point, it's unfathomable to ever believe it again.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, a lot of things, like even from when I was a kid, I realize now it's like, I was questioning way back then. Mm-hmm. Like I remember asking my dad, if the dinosaurs existed millions and millions and millions of years before man, how did God create the earth in 7 days?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
That I still remember. And the only thing he could say to me was, you need to ask Pastor John.
Let him deal with it.
Because he didn't have an answer for me. But, I would question my ex-father-in-law. Like I said, he was a Pentecostal preacher, and I would ask him questions like, how long was a day in the Bible? Mm-hmm. Just questions that I would have. So, I mean, it was my entire being, I had questions, even from a kid.
Kids ask the best questions.
Oh, they do.
I love their inquisitive minds. I love now that I get to actually encourage their inquisitive minds instead of squashing it. Like, don't worry about that. God can do whatever. God can do anything. So just believe on faith. No, now it's like, I like that you're asking that question. Dig a little deeper. Yeah. I even try to stray away from, like when my son is talking about Santa Claus or zombies or whatever, like I'll ask questions like, well, do you think that that's real? Do you think zombies are real? Mm-hmm. No, I guess not. Like we just have those kinds of conversations, and it's so cool to like watch his wheels turn and him figuring things out for himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. It does make you feel good. And even when they get older, it's awesome. Like, even not just the non-belief, but the humanistic part of it. My girls are amazing. Like I said, my oldest just started her, I guess it's almost second year of college. She's going to the big WVU. Cool. And we had our orientation a couple weekends ago, and they had, it's a very diverse and inclusive university. It's amazing. And they had an information fair, and they had like the LGBTQ center was represented there. And they had a really awesome program to help people that are sexually assaulted on campus, and how to prevent it, and how to be a buddy in the situation, and how to be a counselor, and just this. And that's the first thing they flocked to.
How cool.
Was like, this is the stuff that they want to help with, and this is stuff they want to volunteer with, and it makes Mama's heart feel so good, because that's the future of us. Those are the ones that are going to be voting.
Yep.
Here in the next election, they're going to be the ones voting.
Yeah, that gives me hope to see the next generation becoming more and more liberal, more progressive, more accepting. Yeah. I want to see more of that trend.
Yeah.
And I will do everything in my power to make it so. But wrapping up, because I see we have reached our time, is there anything else that you would like to share? Anything you would like to share with like maybe people who are going through what you went through or are coming out of it, or anywhere you want to point people where they can get a hold of you, anything like that? Go ahead and share.
Well, the first thing that I always like to tell people is be patient. It's very difficult to expect someone in an abusive relationship to just leave. It's almost impossible. They are manipulated mentally and physically, and a lot of times financially, to the point where they cannot go. It's just sometimes safe for them too. Be patient, be a friend, listen. In my case, my best friend took a joke that I had made, and it snowballed from there. I felt like I had an ally. Be their ally. Be someone that, they can talk to without judgment. If there's a serious situation and you want to talk about it, then you can be that person there for them. Believe them. That is the most important thing I can tell someone, is especially in the times we are living now, someone tells you that they're being abused, believe them. Believe them. Because sometimes that is, I had the worst time feeling validated for years. I think this year alone was probably the first time that I've actually felt validated. My ex-husband was arrested earlier, probably about 3 months ago, for abusing his now girlfriend.
Jeez.
And yeah, he is on supervised probation, and he has to be alcohol and drug tested. And if he fails that, which he will, he has to go to jail for a year, which to me, I think was my validation, because I kept it in and I didn't call the police. I didn't report any of the stuff that happened to me because I was scared to. I knew that I didn't have anywhere to go, and that when I came back, it would be 10 times worse. So when I had a broken nose, or I had busted lips, or black eyes, or sprained necks, I would go to the doctor. I'd go to the hospital and tell them, I don't know what happened. I fell into the coffee table when I tripped over the dog. I would make up stories because I knew what it would be if I actually told somebody at that time. And, getting out of that relationship, he gaslighted me to the point where he told me nobody would believe me. Mm-hmm. I was a very depressed person. I never physically committed suicide, but I thought about it. And I voiced that opinion to him. And I told him many occasions that if it wasn't for my children, I probably would have made an attempt. Right. And he used that against me.
Jeez.
And he, when we were getting a divorce, he said, well, she's mentally ill. She's this, and this. So, of course, I felt like I was not believed. I felt vulnerable and small and just not believed. And that, to me, is the most important thing, is to make that person feel validated.
Yeah.
Tell them, I believe you. What can I do to help? Because especially when your abuser is someone that everybody knows, his dad's a preacher, his mom's a Sunday school teacher, and, he's one of the popular kids in school. Nobody would have ever guessed. Oh, well, he's such a nice guy. I would have never thought that. Nobody knew anything. You just don't feel believed. And to me, that is the most important thing to help someone's confidence, is to believe them.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anywhere you want to point people as far as anything you want to plug?
My resources that I use a lot, I especially advocate for, there's an organization called the Joyful Heart Foundation, which was actually founded by Mariska Hargitay, that plays Olivia Benson on SVU. It is not only for domestic violence, but sexual assault victims, rape victims, that type. I always point people in that direction because they have some awesome statistics. .org is another organization. It's probably the first one that I ever got involved in. They actually do some really awesome things. Unfortunately, they don't do enough, I don't think anybody does enough. But a lot of times they'll have public service announcements, like the Super Bowl and commercials and stuff, and they'll use like football players, especially around the time where players were abusing their wives and it was big news. They have No More Weeks on the USA channel where they have marathons of Law and Order SVU, and then they have like the actors do TV spots and things like that, which is awesome. They have some really awesome resources there too. So,
All right, awesome.
Very good.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show this week, Melanie. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for being vulnerable with us and telling us your story.
Sure.
Yeah. We love you, and we're really glad that you are in an amazing relationship with an awesome guy.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that you are
It's
free from the bondage of religion.
Yeah.
You broke those chains. I like to use religious lingo in the opposite direction.
Yeah. Awesome.
But anyway,
It was great having you and talking to you.
yeah, thanks so much.
Well, thank you for listening to our podcast this week with our interview with Mel. But before we go, we'd like to thank our patrons. And this week we have a couple new patrons that we'd like to thank.
Yay.
Yay.
Thank you.
First of all, we have Jonathan, and we also have Steve. So thank you guys for your new support. We appreciate every little bit.
Yep, you rock. And then, of course, we want to do our plugs for the patrons who are at the level at $5 or above, who get a plug every week on the show. So we'll start with Marissa McCool. Thank you, Marissa, for your support. Thank you, Marissa, for your support. And Marissa would like to plug We Too, which is her new podcast, where she delves into stories from people who have survived sexual assault and harassment and all kinds of things like that. It's kind of an extension of the Me Too campaign, so check it out. And her new book, Passing Cars. She actually has several books, but this is her most recent one. It's the internal monologue of a neurodivergent trans girl. And I've started reading it. It's very interesting, and definitely something that you should look into if you're interested in that.
We would also like to thank Christopher. He wants us to plug the Tri-State Freethinkers. They are a great organization in the tri-state area of Ohio, Cincinnati area, Kentucky, and Indiana. And they do a lot of events and community service events and social events. Basically, there's
activism, community.
No, I just couldn't remember the A. There's events for activism, community, education, and social events. So there's a wide range of different ways you can get plugged in, help the community, make new friends, hang out, and yeah, it's a great organization.
Definitely. And then there's Thomas Smith of Serious Inquiries Only. And his podcast is about taking a critical thinking look into science, religion, politics, and anything that is relevant and interesting. And his podcast is one of my favorites. You should check it out.
And then lastly, we would also like to thank Rich for his support. Rich would like to plug Recovering from Religion. It's recoveringfromreligion.org, and they are an organization that helps people who are coming out of religion and need help kind of figuring out where they belong and how to deal with the issues that come along with losing your religion. They have a page of resources that you can look into. They have a hotline that you can call in and talk to somebody for support. And they also have a chat line where you can talk to people if you don't like to talk on the phone or have phone anxiety, and it's just easier to chat on the computer.
Yep, so thanks for listening this week. We greatly appreciate all of our listeners as well as our patrons, and we will catch you next time. But in the meantime,
Keep it real.